In a world that never stops scrolling, have you forgotten how to stop and breathe? Every morning, we wake up not to silence, but to screens. Before we say a prayer, we check a post. Before we feel peace, we feel pressure, and slowly, without even knowing it, we've traded mental clarity for digital chaos. But here's the truth: your mind wasn't made to carry the weight of the entire internet. It was made for focus, purpose, and peace. Today, I'll show you how to reclaim that peace. 5 steps to mental clarity in 2025. Not by escaping technology, but by mastering it before it masters you. You know what's interesting? We live in a world more connected than ever before. At least, that's what we're told. One swipe, one click, one notification away from anyone, anywhere. We carry the world in our pockets, but somehow we feel more scattered, more anxious, more exhausted than ever. Isn't that strange? The very thing that promised us freedom has quietly placed us in a kind of mental prison. A beautiful, glowing, constantly buzzing cage. Let me say something that might sting a little. Just because you're constantly plugged in doesn't mean you're actually living. Constant connectivity is not the same as true connection, but we don't even notice it. That's the dangerous part. We think we're staying informed, staying productive, staying entertained, but what we're actually doing is drowning, bit by bit, in a sea of never-ending noise. You ever feel like your brain's on a treadmill that never stops, that no matter how much rest you try to get, your mind is still racing? Yeah, that's not just you. See, digital overload isn't loud. It doesn't kick down the door and announce itself. It's subtle, it's silent, it sneaks in through the little things. You wake up, and before you even say good morning to someone in your home, you've already opened Instagram. You scroll through news you didn't ask for, opinions you didn't need, ads for things you're not even sure you want. And before your feet even touch the floor, your mind is already full. That's not peace, that's not clarity. That's clutter, and it's not just about time wasted, it's about attention stolen. You lose the ability to sit in silence. You lose the joy of being fully present with people. You start forgetting things, you react quicker, get irritated easier. You start to feel empty and don't know why. You keep reaching for your phone to fill something that your phone didn't create and can't fix. But here's the deeper truth: this isn't just about distraction, it's about identity, because the more we scroll, the more we compare. The more we compare, the more we doubt. We start asking ourselves, why don't I have what they have? Why isn't my life like that? What am I doing wrong? And suddenly, you're not just digitally overloaded, you're spiritually drained, emotionally worn, mentally foggy. And this is where it gets serious, because when you lose your clarity, you lose your compass. When your mind is always reacting, it's never reflecting, you stop hearing that still voice inside you, the voice that guides you, the voice that grounds you, the voice that reminds you who you really are and what really matters. Listen to me, no one is coming to protect your mind for you. No one's going to knock on your door and say, hey, you've had too much screen time today. No app, no algorithm, no device is designed to guard your peace. You have to fight for it. You have to reclaim it, not out of guilt, but out of love. Love for your mind, love for your time, love for your soul. You see, when you're constantly connected to everything, you're deeply connected to nothing, and the greatest danger is that you won't even notice. You'll call it normal, you'll call it just how life is now, but it's not how life has to be. So if you've been feeling tired lately, not physically but mentally, if you've been struggling to focus, to pray, to be still, if you've been feeling like life is moving fast and you're just trying to hang on, hear me, it's not your fault. The system is designed this way, but just because the world runs at a frantic pace doesn't mean your soul has to. You were not made to consume endless streams of content. You were not built to manage the emotional weight of 100 lives at once. You were not created to be available 24/7 to everyone else while being unavailable to yourself. What you were made for is purpose, peace, presence, and clarity, but you can't reach that clarity unless you first see the cost of the overload. You have to wake up to the fact that the constant buzz is not harmless, it's keeping you from your best, clearest, most grounded self. And when you start to see that, you realize that peace doesn't come from more access, more updates, more alerts. It comes from stillness, it comes from choosing what gets your attention, it comes from stepping away long enough to see what really matters. Because here's the truth that no one tells you: if you don't take control of your mind, something else will. And it usually starts with a notification. It's funny how we can be surrounded by noise all day and still not realize we're overwhelmed. You ever have one of those days where everything feels just a little off? You snap at someone you care about for something small. You forget why you walked into a room. You feel like you're always behind, even when you're not sure what you're behind on. Most people think stress announces itself like a thunderstorm, loud, obvious, but it doesn't. It whispers, it shows up in subtle, quiet ways. And the scary thing is, if you're not paying attention, you miss the signs completely. You tell yourself you're just tired, or busy, or in a funk. But here's what I've learned: the mind always gives us clues. Before it burns out, it sends a warning. Before it crashes, it flickers. And if we don't slow down long enough to notice those flickers, that quiet whisper becomes a shout. I want to talk about those flickers, because some of you have been living in digital overload for so long it feels normal. And the first step toward clarity, real clarity, is recognizing what fog looks like. Maybe lately you've found it harder to focus. You sit down to work or read or pray, and within minutes, your mind is somewhere else. You're checking your phone, refreshing a page, opening a new tab. Not because you need to, just because your brain doesn't know how to stay still anymore. Or maybe you're always mentally tired, even when you're physically rested. You go to bed early, but you still wake up drained. That's not just poor sleep, that's a cluttered mind trying to process too much. Sometimes it shows up in our relationships. You find yourself zoning out while someone talks. You forget important things people told you. Not because you don't care, because your brain is overloaded with data it was never meant to carry. You ever notice how easily irritated you've been lately? The little things that never used to bother you suddenly feel unbearable. That's a sign. Your nervous system is telling you, I'm tapped out. Your patience has been consumed by 1,000 small digital demands. And then there's the anxiety, the low hum in the background. The constant feeling that you're behind or missing something. It creeps in slowly and settles in quietly, not loud enough to stop you, just enough to rob you of peace. The thing is, we rarely connect these symptoms to our digital habits. We look for external problems. Maybe it's work, maybe it's family, maybe it's something I ate. But often, the overload is coming from our screen time, from the non-stop information input we allow into our minds every day. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose. Your mind can only handle so much, and yet, every scroll, every video, every headline is asking for your attention, demanding your emotional response. Multiply that by hundreds of times a day, and of course your mind feels foggy, of course your spirit feels tired. But we don't notice, because this overload has become our baseline. We've adjusted to the noise, we've accepted the fog. We've called dysfunction a normal, and I want to challenge that, because mental fog doesn't mean you're broken. It means your mind is overloaded. It means your system is operating beyond its design, and your clarity is not gone, it's just buried. You can't fix what you don't recognize, so let's recognize it. Let's be honest about what digital overload looks like in real life. It's the inability to sit still. It's the habit of checking your phone the moment there's a pause. It's the need for constant input, even when you're doing something else. It's struggling to be present. It's forgetting what peace feels like. If any of that resonates with you, don't run from it. Don't minimize it. Just acknowledge it, because that's where change begins, with honesty. And let me be clear, this isn't about guilt. I'm not here to shame you for being on your phone, or for using social media, or for loving technology. I get it, we all use these tools, they're part of our lives, but what I am saying is this. If you're not paying attention, those tools start using you. They start shaping how you think, how you feel, how you show up in the world. And if you ignore the signs long enough, the cost is not just distraction, it's your mental and emotional well-being. So today, I want you to ask yourself a question. What is my mind trying to tell me that I've been too busy to hear? What signals have I been ignoring because I assumed they were just part of modern life? Because those subtle signs, the fog, the fatigue, the irritability, they're not just a life in 2025. They're your system saying, something's not right, and the sooner you listen, the sooner you can clear the noise and find your way back to clarity. It starts by paying attention to the whispers before they become shouts. We live in a culture that worships hustle. Keep going, keep pushing, keep grinding. Productivity has become the badge of honor we wear, even if we're quietly burning out beneath it. And if you ever try to slow down, even just for a moment, there's a voice in your head that whispers, "You're falling behind." But let me ask you something. Behind what? Behind who? What's the finish line we're chasing when the race never actually ends? I think one of the biggest lies we've been sold is this: that rest is weakness, that stillness is laziness. That unless you're producing something, posting something, checking something, answering something, you're wasting time, and because of that lie, we've stopped giving ourselves permission to just be. We used to have pauses in our days, moments between things, space to breathe. Now, every gap gets filled. Waiting in line, scroll. 5 minutes before bed, scroll. Wake up in the morning, scroll. The silence that used to restore us has been replaced with noise that keeps us restless. And the cost isn't just time, it's clarity, it's peace, it's the voice inside us, the one that knows what really matters, that we can't hear anymore. That's why we need to talk about this idea, stepping back to step forward, and not just metaphorically. Literally, intentionally, stepping away from the noise, the pressure, the pings, all of it, not because we're anti-technology, but because we're pro-clarity. Because we can't stay grounded if we're constantly plugged in. I call it a digital Sabbath. Now, I get it. That word Sabbath carries different meanings for different people. For some, it's a day of worship. For others, it's rest. For some, it's just unfamiliar, but at its core, Sabbath is about sacred pause, about choosing to stop, not because everything's done, but because you need to be reminded that you're not a machine. And that's what we've forgotten. We've started treating ourselves like machines: work harder, sleep less, stay available, answer immediately. React quickly, keep up. But you're not a device, you're not a content stream, you're a human being, and your mind, your soul, needs rest. And not just any rest, not the kind where you're half watching a show while checking emails, not the kind where you're with your family but mentally still at work. I'm talking about real rest, rest that lets your nervous system reset, rest that allows your thoughts to settle. Rest that reminds you of who you are when the world isn't talking at you. A digital Sabbath is one of the most powerful things you can do for your mental clarity. Even if it's just 1 hour a day, even if it's one evening a week, set it aside. Make it sacred, turn off the devices, log out, step away, and in that space, do something that brings you back to yourself. Maybe it's a walk, maybe it's prayer, maybe it's journaling, or reading a real book, or sitting outside with no agenda at all. Maybe it's just lying still and letting your mind breathe. When you do that, when you actually pause, you start to notice things again. You start to feel again, you start to see how much you've been rushing past, the beauty, the insight, the presence, the things your soul's been trying to show you, but couldn't because the volume was too loud. And don't be surprised if, the first time you try it, you feel uncomfortable. That's normal. We've gotten addicted to stimulation. Silence feels unfamiliar, boredom feels wrong, but that discomfort, it's not bad, it's detox, it's your mind recalibrating. It's your nervous system stepping out of fight or flight and into rest and reset. Here's the thing: when you build in time to step away from the digital noise, you return to your life with more strength, not less. More focus, more patience, more presence. You stop reacting to everything and start responding to the things that truly matter. And maybe, just maybe, you'll start to realize how many things you were carrying that you never needed to carry in the first place. How much pressure you were feeling that no one was putting on you but yourself. How much peace was waiting for you, just on the other side of pause. We've bought into the myth that the only way to move forward is to keep moving, but some of the most powerful breakthroughs don't happen while you're sprinting. They happen in the stillness. They happen in the quiet. When you finally slow down long enough to hear what your life has been trying to tell you. So give yourself that space, even if the world keeps spinning, even if your to-do list stays full. Even if it feels awkward at first, because your clarity is too valuable to lose in the noise. You ever feel like your mind is just full, like it's carrying way too many tabs open at once? You're trying to think clearly, but you're juggling news updates, trending topics, opinions from strangers, messages from 10 different apps, and somewhere in the middle of all that, you're just trying to remember what you actually think. That's what happens when we stop being the gatekeeper of our own minds. See, we talk a lot about guarding our homes, protecting our families, locking our doors at night, but we don't talk enough about protecting our mental space. And in today's world, where information comes at us faster than we can process it, that kind of protection is not just optional, it's essential. Here's what I mean. Every time you scroll, you're making decisions not just about what to click on, but about what to let in. You're deciding what gets your attention, your energy, your focus. You're choosing what voices get to speak into your life. And that matters, because what you feed your mind eventually shapes your beliefs, your emotions, your habits, even your identity. Now, I'm not saying you need to unplug completely. I'm not anti-content, but I am saying this: in a world full of noise, you need filters. Not everything deserves access to your mental real estate. You ever notice how, after a while, you start to sound like what you've been consuming? You take on the tone, the attitude, even the anxiety of the content you're regularly watching. That's not an accident. Your mind is being formed, little by little, by what you allow through the gate. So the question becomes, are you curating what you consume, or are you consuming whatever comes? Because there's a difference. Curating means you're intentional. You're not just scrolling aimlessly, you're selecting what aligns with your values, what nourishes your soul, what lifts you instead of drains you. Curating means you know your mental energy is valuable, and you treat it like it's worth something. But when you don't curate, when you just consume passively, you give the world permission to shape your mindset without even realizing it. You let fear-based headlines define your worldview. You let toxic comparison shrink your self-worth. You let negativity slip through, thinking it's harmless entertainment, when really it's planting seeds. You know what I've realized? Some of the exhaustion we feel isn't just from doing too much. It's from taking in too much, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. We're overwhelmed not because we're weak, but because we've stopped guarding what we allow in. And if you don't actively choose what fills your mind, the world will choose for you. And let's be honest, the world doesn't have your peace in mind. The algorithm doesn't care about your clarity. It cares about keeping you hooked, not keeping you whole. That's why you've got to be your own filter. You've got to stop and ask yourself, is this helping me or hurting me? Is this feeding my peace or stealing it? Is this content shaping me into the person I want to be, or pulling me away from it? And sometimes the answer will be uncomfortable. Because some of the content we're most addicted to is the very thing that's been quietly draining us. It feels entertaining in the moment, but afterward, we feel more anxious, more distracted, more disconnected. That's not coincidence, that's spiritual erosion, and you don't have to accept that. You have more control than you think. You get to decide what voices you listen to, what energy you allow into your life, what tone you carry with you when you walk into a room. But it starts with awareness. It starts with catching yourself in those moments when you're about to go down a digital rabbit hole and saying, is this helping me become more of who I'm called to be? Because let me tell you something, peace doesn't come from more information. Clarity doesn't come from more content. They come from alignment, from choosing what's good for you over what's popular, from protecting your focus like it matters, because it does. One of the best things you can do for your mind is to declutter your feed, unfollow accounts that stir up anxiety. Mute negativity, limit content that makes you feel less than, start following voices that speak life, that remind you of your purpose, that bring wisdom, not just noise. And don't just curate your content, curate your conversations, the people you talk to, the voices you surround yourself with, the energy you absorb from others. Those things matter just as much as the media you consume. Protect your peace. It's not selfish, it's necessary. We don't get clarity by accident. It doesn't just show up. It's something we have to guard, choose, and fight for daily, and it starts with being intentional about what we allow into our mental space. Because what you allow in eventually flows out. We live in a world that celebrates noise. Noise gets attention. Noise gets clicks, noise gets rewarded. But the problem is, the more noise we allow in, the more we lose touch with the quiet places inside us. The places where peace lives, where clarity begins, where purpose is heard, not shouted. You ever notice how rare stillness has become? I'm not just talking about physical stillness, I'm talking about mental stillness, emotional stillness, that sense of calm where your mind isn't racing, your heart isn't tight, and you're not feeling the pressure to be somewhere else or be someone else. That kind of stillness, most of us can't even remember what it feels like, and that's a problem. Because without stillness, you can't hear direction, you can't hear truth, you can't hear God, not because He's not speaking, but because we're too distracted to listen. Let's be honest, we're constantly surrounded by inputs. Every few seconds, something is demanding our attention, a ping, a headline, a video, a voice. Even in the quiet moments, we reach for our phones like we're allergic to silence. We don't let ourselves just be anymore. We've trained our brains to need stimulation, even if that stimulation is slowly draining our joy. But here's what I've learned: stillness isn't weakness, it's not wasted time, it's not something you do when you've run out of options. It's a discipline, a practice, a decision. It's you saying, my peace matters more than my notifications. It's you saying, before I let the world shape my day, I'm going to check in with my soul first. And I'm telling you, even 5 to 10 minutes of intentional stillness a day can change everything. You don't need a fancy meditation app. You don't need a retreat in the mountains. You don't need to light a candle and sit cross-legged on a pillow for 2 hours. You just need to start right where you are, right now. Maybe it's waking up just a little earlier and sitting in silence before the world gets loud. Maybe it's closing your eyes in the middle of your lunch break and taking a few deep breaths, real ones, where you actually feel your shoulders drop. Maybe it's putting your phone on airplane mode and sitting with a journal, just asking yourself, how am I really doing today? A stillness is about creating space, space for your thoughts to settle, space for your emotions to be acknowledged, space for truth to rise to the surface, because when everything is loud, everything feels urgent, and when everything feels urgent, we lose sight of what actually matters. You know what happens in stillness: you get perspective, you start to see clearly again, you realize that the thing that felt so heavy yesterday maybe isn't that important today. You remember who you are, apart from what you do or what others think of you. You reconnect with the deeper parts of yourself that get drowned out in the rush of everyday life, and sometimes, in that quiet space, you hear a whisper. A prompting, a reminder. Maybe it's a let go of that grudge, maybe it's a slow down, you're moving too fast. Maybe it's a call your dad, or maybe it's just a simple, you're doing better than you think you are. That whisper, whatever form it takes, is where clarity begins, but you'll miss it if you're always moving, if your brain is always bouncing from one screen to the next. If every moment of stillness gets filled with someone else's voice instead of your own. That's why it's so important to protect these quiet moments like your life depends on it, because in many ways it does. Clarity doesn't come from more hustle, it comes from more awareness, and awareness comes from stillness. You don't have to make it complicated. You don't have to do it perfectly, you just have to do it, even if your mind wanders. Even if you feel awkward, even if you only manage 3 quiet minutes before life rushes back in. That's okay. The point isn't perfection, the point is presence, and the more you show up for those moments, the more they'll start showing up for you. You'll find that you're calmer in conversations, clearer in decisions, more grounded when things around you feel chaotic. You'll stop reacting to life and start responding with intention, because you've trained yourself to pause, you've trained yourself to listen. You've created room for clarity to enter, and in a world that's always trying to pull you in 100 different directions, that pause becomes your power. Your breakthrough isn't buried in your inbox, your peace isn't waiting at the bottom of your social feed. It's already inside you, quiet, calm, and ready to be heard. All you have to do is make space. Technology isn't the enemy. Let's start there. The phones we carry, the apps we use, the platforms we scroll, they are not evil. In fact, a lot of them were created to help us. To connect, to learn, to grow, to communicate faster and better, and let's be real, we depend on them. Our schedules, our work, our messages, even how we navigate the world around us, but the problem begins when the tools we're supposed to use begin to use us. You've probably felt it, that pull, that itch to check your phone every few minutes, even when there's no reason to. The twitch to reach for it during a pause in conversation, the rush of anxiety when your battery's low or you left your phone in another room. That sense of panic when there's no Wi-Fi, like you've suddenly lost oxygen. That's not just habit, that's something deeper. That's control, and if we're honest, a lot of us aren't living with our tech anymore, we're living under it. It's shaping how we think, how we respond, even how we define our worth. You ever post something and start checking the likes 5 minutes later? You ever see someone else's highlight reel and immediately feel like you're falling behind? You ever lose an entire hour without realizing it, and then feel both wired and drained at the same time? That's what it looks like when technology stops being a tool and starts becoming a tyrant. It stops serving us and starts steering us. But it doesn't have to stay that way. You don't need to throw your phone out the window or delete every app. You don't need to go live in the woods to find peace. What you do need is to reclaim your role. You need to remind your mind and your devices that you're in charge, because here's the truth: tech is powerful. But your attention is even more powerful. Your focus, your time, your emotional energy, those are some of the most valuable things you have. And if you don't guard them, something else will claim them for you. So let me ask you, what would it look like if you lived with tech instead of under it? Maybe it means turning off non-essential notifications. Maybe it means setting a screen time limit and actually sticking to it. Maybe it's keeping your phone out of the bedroom, or off the dinner table, or out of the first 30 minutes of your day. Small shifts like that, they create space, and that space, that's where peace lives. It could even be more intentional. What if you had specific hours every day where you went offline on purpose, not because you had to, but because you chose to? What if you blocked out time each week to just be present with your family, or with your thoughts, or in your spiritual life, without interruption? You're not rejecting tech, you're redeeming it. You're saying, this tool can be part of my life, but it doesn't get to run my life. Because when you live under something, you lose your sense of control, but when you live with it, mindfully, intentionally, you start to notice things again. You hear your thoughts more clearly, you become more present in your conversations, you start responding to life instead of reacting to it. And the beauty is, you don't need to make drastic changes overnight, you just need to start by asking, is this helping me stay connected to who I really am? Is this serving my values, or distracting me from them? Is this bringing me closer to peace, or pulling me further from it? When you begin asking those questions, your relationship with technology starts to shift. It stops being about guilt or rules, it becomes about freedom, about choosing what adds value to your life, and letting go of what quietly steals it. You know, so many people feel like they're just surviving each day, mentally, emotionally, because their attention is constantly scattered. And it's not because they're weak, it's because they've never been taught how to live in control of their tools. But once you learn how to set those boundaries, once you experience the clarity that comes from saying, I'll use this, but I won't be owned by it, something unlocks. You feel stronger, calmer, more anchored. Because you're no longer living in reaction, you're living with intention. This isn't about perfection, it's not about never getting distracted or never scrolling too long, it's about waking up. About realizing you don't have to live under constant digital pressure, you can take a breath, you can create space. You can live with tech, use it, benefit from it, but never let it define your worth or dictate your days. Because peace isn't found in the next app, or the next device, or the next upgrade. Peace is found when you take back control of your attention and live like you know it's worth something.